12 inches of rain hammered the Texas hill country in barely an hour, and the Guadalupe River surged 26 feet higher in just 45 minutes. Right as families were lighting their very first sparklers, what began as a night of barbecues and red, white, and blue face paint devolved into frantic 911 calls and dim flashlight beams cutting through rising brown water. Before dawn, Main Street shopkeepers were pushing furniture onto counters, while volunteer firefighters wrapped rope around traffic light poles to keep from being swept away. By sunrise, holiday cheer had been replaced by the clatter of helicopter rotors and the brutal arithmetic of counting bodies instead of parade floats. At 4 a.m., twin thunderheads slammed into the north and south forks of the Guadalupe, dumping so much water that river gauges maxed out before officials could record exact amounts. Hydrologists later discovered localized pockets where 15 inches had fallen, an entire Texas summer's rainfall in a single storm burst. The converging forks acted like a liquid battering ram, shredding RV parks, flipping pickup trucks, and peeling chunks of pavement off County Road 1340 as if it were wet linoleum. One deputy described the sound as a freight train mixed with a demolition derby, and the wreckage it left behind looked exactly that violent. But that wasn't the whole story. Founded nearly a century ago, Camp Mystic sits on a postcard-perfect bend of the river, famous for canoe races and late-night talent shows. When the power failed sometime after 3 a.m., counselors raced from cabin to cabin, hoisting pajama-clad girls onto bunk bed mattresses they planned to float if necessary. Moments later, a wall of water ripped doors from hinges, scattering life jackets like confetti and snapping canoes against live oak trunks. By first light, 27 campers were unaccounted for, and parents were trapped in a purgatory of unanswered texts that turned every passing minute into agony. And what happened next would shock everyone. Within hours, more than 1,000 responders swarmed Kerr County. Coast Guard swimmers dangling from hoists, Cajun Navy volunteers in bass boats, and DPS troopers piloting night vision drones through snagged power lines. They yanked grandparents off shed roofs, cradled soaked Labradors in rescue baskets, and carried toddlers whose life vests still held bits of tree bark. Despite the heroics, the death tally kept climbing. 6, then 27, 43, and by Sunday morning, 51. 15 of them children whose backpacks still sat untouched on cabin hooks. Sheriff Larry Letha spoke for every exhausted rescuer when he promised, voice hoarse, "We will not stop until the river gives back every last soul." But that's not all. As grieving families asked why their phones buzzed long after the river had peaked, attention shifted to the National Weather Service office covering the hill country. That station, like many nationwide, has been running roughly 20% below staffing targets since federal hiring freezes took hold last winter. Former NOAA Chief Rick Spinrad warned Congress months ago that such vacancies inevitably degrade the speed of hyperlocal alerts. And now, critics say the Guadalupe tragedy proves his point in blood-red headlines. The Weather Service insists it issued a flood watch 24 hours earlier, but concedes that understaffing delayed the cell tower wireless emergency alerts families rely on at 3 a.m., when every second matters. Listen to this. Climatologists have long noted that a warmer Gulf pumps more moisture inland, and Texas has warmed about 1.4 degrees Celsius since the 1970s, enough to supercharge any thunderstorm that drifts over its limestone canyons. Unlike Hurricane Harvey's slow-motion siege, Friday's rain bomb struck a steep watershed shaped like a giant funnel, converting extra humidity into a flash flood fire hose. One hydrologist likened the setup to pouring a bathtub through a garden hose. Velocity skyrockets because the water has nowhere else to go. The result? A deluge so sudden that even seasoned river guides admitted they'd never imagined water could rise that high, that fast. But politics rushed in on a tide of disaster. Governor Greg Abbott expanded his disaster declaration to 6 counties, then signed a federal aid request that President Trump vowed to approve before the ink dries. Standing beside the governor, a FEMA liaison promised all resources, all the time, even as reporters asked whether the administration's proposed 25% cut to NOAA research had handicapped early warnings. A local judge summed up the tension. You can't sandbag the hill country with talking points, but you sure can drown in bureaucracy. Meanwhile, city crews shoveled mud from storefronts the moment cameras rolled, south toward the next press conference. Kerrville residents will measure time as before and after the wall of water. A young couple who leapt from their porch as 4 motorcycles, a Jeep, and their dog's food bowls floated past. A grandmother who watched her RV park fold like origami while her weather app still said, "Chance of scattered showers." Neighbors formed human chains to yank strangers from swirling eddies, then searched flooded dog parks for stranded terriers and tabbies once the water receded. The smell of diesel, river silt, and cedar sap hung in the air as volunteers taped missing pet flyers to streetlights that leaned at drunken angles. First the roar, then the silence, one man whispered, staring at a cypress stump where a picnic table used to be. Even as search crews combed cedar thickets and overturned RVs, meteorologists tracked Tropical Storm Chantal, churning off the Carolina coast, with a sprawling moisture shield that could arc into central Texas by midweek. With soils already saturated, another 6-inch burst could convert small creeks into fresh death traps, leaving rescuers racing a ticking clock they can't control. Command posts now end every briefing with the same mantra: assume every missing person is alive. Speed is life. Skyward glances toward the east grow longer each hour, as if the next cloud bank might decide whether grief stops here or starts all over again. One holiday morning, a freak knot of warm air, limestone canyons, and human blind spots rewrote 4th of July tradition into tragedy. Campers vanished, neighborhoods shredded, and a state arguing over budgets while water still drips from stripped bark cypress limbs. Climate physics says storms will grow nastier. Staffing charts show our warning systems shrinking, and somewhere between those two lines lies the cost in human lives. If a single missed alert can erase an entire summer camp, what might the next unheeded rain bomb rewrite? A hospital, a stadium, an entire town. Share your best flood safety tip or your own storm story below. Someone scrolling past may need it tonight, because rivers forget nothing and warnings mean everything.